What's a creepy, remote, or otherwise off-limits place you have or would like to explore? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. First job when I was 15 had an off-site warehouse to store product. Boss takes me there to grab some stuff and tells me it used to be a missile silo. He then uses a knife to open a door to part of the building that we weren't supposed to have access to. Walk in, and it's like an office setup with no furniture. Then we walk into the back and there's a long stairwell down. Go into a huge underground room with a giant round hole in the floor. Got to explore all kinds of heavy blast doors, lots of concrete, weird control rooms with some instrumentation still in place. We were able to explore 2 floors down, but the lower levels were all flooded. Super creepy and super cool. After doing some research later in life, it was an old 50s Nike missile base. I'm from Salt Lake City. It's been torn down now, I think, but in high school, kids would go to Ted Bundy's house. I wasn't allowed to go, and the older I get, the more grateful I am for that. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang, guarded by the famous Terracotta Army. It's thought to contain rivers of mercury and booby traps. Grignard Island in the north of Scotland, where the British government tested anthrax on sheep. Apparently they've cleaned up the traces of anthrax, but the place seems haunting. Some ghost town, like the Turkish identical castle town, one of many Chinese ghost towns, or former Russian secret restricted access city. I would love to dive the wreck of the Britannic someday. It's an immensely difficult and dangerous dive at 400 feet deep in the Mediterranean, not to mention it requires special permits from the Greek government. However, the Britannic is the sister ship of the Titanic, and the 2 ships are essentially identical. Luckily, the Britannic is fairly well preserved and within technical diving depths. You can penetrate the wreck where the skylight shattered and float amongst the grand staircase, identical to the iconic Titanic grand staircase that lies 12,500 feet under the sea. I'm a huge effing nerd. Ever since I was a little kid, I always thought this dive seemed like the best one on the planet. I'd be fascinated to go inside the US military base built into the mountains in Colorado. We used to jump the fence and go in here when we were teenagers. Had no idea it was a smallpox hospital. I guess it was a loony bin after that. Place was creepy as F. Still, medical equipment everywhere. We used to get really stoned and run around in there till we got the shit scared out of us, lol. Does the bedroom of Elvis in Graceland count? It's been kept the exact same as the day he died, and I think it'd be interesting as hell to explore the king's lair. Everest Base Camp. I don't want to climb the thing. I enjoy being alive, but I'd love to just go hang out at base camp for a week or so. I'd love to visit Centralia, Pennsylvania, abandoned because of a coal mine fire apparently still burning to this day. The town sounds exactly like the perfect setup for a horror movie. That's gotta be some secret doomsday bunker around the world that only really rich people know about. Would be cool to check out. Or the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. That would be cool. Garamba Park in Congo. Probably the last remaining, mostly unchanged true wilderness of Africa. Remote, few have been there, and is often plagued with heavily armed groups who hunt for the wildlife, killing all in their way. Pitcher, Oklahoma. Something about the town is so interesting despite it now being almost obsolete, especially since it still has chat plates, and to know that chat was used in driveways, sandboxes, and anything they could find a use for. Next would probably be Poveglia, Italy, because it's forbidden, is possibly full of human remains, and it has an abandoned mental hospital. Neat. There is a long-abandoned concert hall beneath a piano store in Boston that I would love to check out. There are some pics online that show some of the ornate design, but I think it would be awesome to explore and see up close. Diego Garcia, a British-owned island in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and all the locals were relocated decades ago. The only thing currently in the island is a US military base. Needless to say, getting permission to visit is difficult. People make a big deal out of Area 51, and that would be a neat place to see. But if you're looking for the country's biggest and darkest secrets, then you're going to have to look at places like Diego Garcia. I had Marine friends stationed there, if you ever want to know more. Spree Park. It's an abandoned amusement park in Berlin with giant dinosaur statues, among other things. It was featured at the end of the movie Hannah, 2011. Good movie. There is a building church, I believe in Ethiopia, that claims to have the real Ark of the Covenant, i.e. the Ark from Indiana Jones. If I recall correctly, only one priest is allowed in, and those that have held that position have a history of going blind after a while. I visited a mothballed nuclear plant in Tennessee years ago. Besides the half-completed plant, they put dozens of what looked like portable prison cells there as well. Never found out why. Not creepy per se, but North Sentinel Island. Seeing a population that has been isolated from the world for potentially up to 55,000 years with only sporadic brief contact would be fascinating. Fascinating in the dozen arrows to the chest way. I'd like to see the undisclosed location where they hide the POTUS in the event of a terrorist attack in Washington or other military incursions on US soil. I want to know where it is, and I want to see the inside of what it is to see what's there. For example, does it contain enough food and supplies to survive a nuclear attack? Are there fancy presidential accommodations, or does the POTUS have to rough it in a crude underground bunker? I also wouldn't mind seeing the White House, but not just the parts where you can go on a tour. I'd want to see everything. I'd especially like to see if there are any secret rooms and/or secret passages. There's a house that sits on the way to a local trail. A long gravel drive splits a weedy field full of hawthorn bush. Big sugar maple trees hide the house all summer. It isn't until winter that the place grabs your attention. The house is thin, 2 stories. The roof is tin and looks to have been tacked on like an old hay barn. I think it was once a form of blue, but now is chalky gray. The fascia under the tin is a black line from the distance of the road. Even from far away, you can see it's saturated, rotten. There's an old 70s looking pickup truck parked on the slope of the drive up just in front of the house. It's the only vehicle. It never moves. For years, I thought the house was abandoned, until one cold day, I saw smoke hanging in the trees above it. I swear it's leaning, sagging. It'll sound strange, but when I look at that house, I feel something pulling at me. It's hard to put into words. My wife asked if I thought someone was tied up in the basement. It's not that at all. It just feels like a physical force points me towards the house, like little hands made of wind, pushing. Go. There is an island in Disney World, Florida, that was part of the park called Treasure Island, later Discovery Island, and it is now abandoned. You would have to steal a boat or swim across alligator-infested water to get there, but sounds amazing and creepy. Niihau, Hawaii. The Forbidden Island. No one is allowed there without explicit permission from the family who owns it. I wouldn't want to disturb anyone living there. I'd probably just wander around looking at plants and shells. For that matter, any of the atolls of the northern Hawaiian Islands seem incredibly interesting to me. In Bolivia, there's a town called Quim. There's no longer used mines there. I went there just to wander around the mountains, and when I came across a mine entrance, I decided to take a look. I got about 5 steps in. I was unbelievably creeped out, and I don't know why. I've never been anywhere so silent, just a feeling of imminent doom. There is apparently a mountain range in Madagascar made entirely of razor-sharp rocks, like so sharp that just touching them leads to hospital-worthy lacerations and hella tall. This is one of the largest unexplored above-water areas on Earth. As far as I know, no one has ever been able to get a drone in there. I picked that place. North Sentinel Island, that island with the tribe of people who are completely cut off from modern civilization and kill those who attempt to visit. There's a fenced-in area near my hometown, Tennessee, United States, that's considered part of Japan. It's big, seems to always be shrouded in fog from the road. Driving by, I see a big old Nissan silo. Normal, but riding by one night, I caught a glimpse of a big building, Hawkins Lab style from Stranger Things. It didn't look like any car plant I have seen, and I don't ever see any driveways or anything. Disclaimer, this is probably nothing special, but it would still be cool to explore and get some answers. I hear Fort Totten near the Rockaways in Queens, New York is an abandoned military base that's apparently haunted. I've always wanted to go, but my fear of the supernatural repels me from such a place. Looks great on the road. I live in a mining town, and one day my ex and I climbed over the hill and trespassed onto the trailing dumping area, basically a huge lake filled with tailings, and everything around it was dead. Even on the islands was kind of eerie. I'd love to experience any village of indigenous people who have never had contact with the outside world. Yet, I wouldn't go even if I had the opportunity because I don't want to be the asshole who destroys them by sneezing or exposing them to Nickelback accidentally. I'd love to see Centralia, which is a Pennsylvania town that was abandoned after a large mine fire started underneath. It served as the inspiration for Silent Hill, and parts of the movie were filmed there. I really want to go to Pripyat. The idea that a normal place for so many people turned into a massive disaster area that will still be inhospitable for years just creeps me out. Also, I want to pet the radioactive dogs because I'm a rebel, LMAO. Old airship hangars. Airships were massive, and the hangars that were built to house them were even bigger. The gargantuan doors sit on railroad track sections. The hangars in the former El Toro base in California are 200 feet tall. One of the hangars in New Jersey has door sections that weigh 1,350 tons. You usually aren't allowed inside because the hangars aren't maintained very well and stuff can fall on you. I think there might be tours though. I would love to see the interior of Nutty Putty Cave. It was sealed off after a cave explorer died a horrific death getting stuck inside. Of course, I'd never go, especially now, but I always wanted to actually see what it looked like, as I read it is a rather unique cave. I had read the walls are like slimy and clay-like from the moisture, which is why it was impossible to hoist the poor explorer out, as nothing would adhere to the mount rescue equipment. This was about 20 years ago. Some friends and I had heard about the ruins of an old sanitarium, which was nearby the currently functioning sanitariums run by the state. A couple of weeks before Halloween, we loaded into my car at about 7 in the evening and drove off for an adventure. We arrived to the area near 8 o'clock, and after circling the block surrounding the active facilities, we finally found what looked to be an empty field surrounded by tall fencing. We figured this must have been the site of the abandoned and defunct sanitarium and parked the car. Flashlights in hand, we piled out of the car and began to walk the perimeter of the fence until we found an opening and made our way inside. As summer had just ended, the grass growing in the field had become quite long, perhaps 3 to 4 feet tall. We walked directly into the field, the grass at chest height at times and brushing against our legs. The terrain slightly dropped as we made our way deeper into the property, and at one point, the air surrounding our lower legs and feet dropped in temperature by several degrees. The hair on the back of my neck stood stiffly as we all made a comment about the cool air being more than a little creepy. We pushed on, thrilled to see what awaited us. We walked another 100 feet and began to make out the silhouette of a 2-story building with no roof. As we approached, we could clearly see that the building had either crumbled with time or been knocked down by a wrecking ball. All that remained of the building was a few walls with a collapsed second floor which laid in a sloped manner like a ramp begging to be walked up. Only one of my friends dared to go up the crumbled concrete flooring, but we all followed up one by one shortly after determining it was safe enough. As we got up to that second level, we surveyed the area and noticed that there were several other building sites nearby. All the buildings were in similar repair, which is to say that they were nearly destroyed entirely and probably not safe to be hanging around. Old beds and pieces of other furniture were strewn about the ruins, slowly rusting and decaying in the open air. Satisfied with our findings, we decided it's best to move along. After getting a taste of the adrenaline, I wanted more and convinced my friends to explore in the direction of the active facilities nearby. We walked away from the ruins and found an exit through the fencing on the opposite side from where we had entered. After 15 minutes of walking along a dimly lit road, we came upon a small 2-story building at about 100 feet out. We saw a sign that said this was a facility for juveniles and could make out a few people milling about in what looked like a common area. Realizing that we were likely peering through the windows and Watching mental patients, we froze and gazed for a moment. An extreme feeling of uneasiness befell us. As we scanned the profile of the building, we noticed a girl dressed in an all-white hospital gown who was staring at us through the window in what appeared to be her private room. One moment later, we heard the reverberating sound of pounding fists on a window and shouts of this girl saying, "Get out! Get out of my house!" Without hesitation, we hightailed it back towards the way we came, made our way to the hole in the fence, back through the field, and to the other hole in the fence from whence we came, and jumped in the car. We didn't speak a word while I fired up the engine, threw the gear shifter into first, and dropped the clutch, leaving a little burned rubber in our wake. As we drew near the freeway entrance, we all let a bit of nervous laughter and a huge sigh of relief. To this day, my friends and I all talk about this experience whenever we were together. I once went to visit friends in their remote North Dakota farming community. I hesitate to call Ambrose a town, as it had about 11 residents at the time, and most of the former homes were abandoned to the wind. She took us exploring, and we crawled into the prospector shack that her great-grandfather had first set up when he came out west. We carefully lifted apart pages of old paper on the floor and read horoscope printouts he had saved up and mailed out for personalized to describe the year he would have in 1914. But what was really creepy was where she took us next. Apparently, the state mental hospital had been there for a few decades, and when it was abandoned, it was totally abandoned. She told us it had been very off-limits in her childhood, but at this point, anyone who cared had long since moved away or passed on. We urged one another through a broken and poorly boarded window and poked around in the twilight, climbing creaking stairs in silent awe of the tattered, curtained, empty ward around us. Amongst rusted old bedpans on the floor of the shadowy elevator shaft, I found what looked at first like finger bones or skeletal remains, but were just small white tiles. I picked them up and have kept them to this day. Their cold white shapes bring back the shivering mystery of that night.